There's a shot in the first Avatar teaser that came out that had the internet up in arms. Is it real or is it CGI? Even Corridor was diving into this to try to understand what was going on here. Your brain saw this moment and thought, there's no way that's CGI. And so everyone was debating, could it possibly be real? Is it CGI? Did they paint the hands blue? And the answer is a little bit more complicated than it seems, because it's technically a bit of both. And I think this little scene, this little moment is the best example of why Avatar 2 feels so real and looks so damn real. I talked about this in my review, but as you're watching the movie, you never really think about how it's fake. You're simply accepting the reality that you're presented because it looks real at that time and in that moment. But the more I've been diving into the behind the scenes on Avatar 2, I think I've narrowed down the exact reason why you feel that way.
There are different ways to make films that have CG characters. What we're interested in with performance capture is the totality of the performance.
The way James shoots these movies with his crew is they essentially get together in what looks like a giant playground and they start acting out all of the scenes and the actions that these characters are doing. Meanwhile, their faces and their performances are being captured in real time so that they can be projected onto CGI bodies and CGI environments. But all of these things that the characters do, they're actually doing them. There's that famous example of Hugh Jackman acting out the voice for Wolverine in Logan, where he's actually running and he's scraping and he's scratching at things to get the growl and the performance out that he needs for the voice of that character. So if you take that same thought, getting that actor into that moment, getting them into that scene and what they're doing in their actions, you can't fake that just sitting in a chair being scanned and being, surrounded by cameras. You actually have to do that stuff to get the right performance.
Physical, emotional, facial, the eyes, everything. The actor creates the emotion. The actor creates the moment. It's our job to make sure that everything the actor did is preserved in their CG character.
You are very hard on them.
And not only does it help the performance with the actors, it also helps with the artists that have to animate all of those movements. Instead of trying to guess how the body maneuvers underwater, they film themselves underwater. So they're mapping all of this digital imagery onto actual performances. It's also a language shift. James Cameron will never call it motion capture. He calls it performance capture because that's the core of what makes these films so great and what makes it stand out so much from most CGI in other blockbuster films. I think the only closest thing we've come to is Thanos in the Avengers movies. But there's plenty of examples in blockbusters where things start to feel rubbery and they don't feel real anymore because we don't actually have a reference. We don't have a real captured moment to base that CGI off of. This particular moment where Jake is just sort of tugging on a piece of leather in the water is a mixture of CGI and real life. We have real hands in a real pond, but then there's digital things that are added to the scene to create the entire moment that we witness. But the little intricacies of what you're looking at are real. And that's essentially how the whole movie was made. So the question becomes, is this really the future of filmmaking though? Is this something that we all want to be a part of? I think if you have a wild imagination like James Cameron and you're trying to create worlds that just simply do not exist in our world, absolutely. This is so fascinating to me that you can now essentially do anything you want that's in your brain can now be made into a film, into a piece of art. You're no longer constrained to locations, you're not constrained to time even. One of the great things about performance capture that James Cameron talks about is that coverage is sort of non-existent anymore because all you gotta do is capture that performance and then you can change the blocking or where that person is in the scene however you want. You can do the reaction shots, you can do everything you need all in one capture. Contrast that with the time and money required and resources to do that on location. Coverage alone is most of the day when you're filming a movie. I still think this type of filmmaking though is still out of reach for almost 99% of filmmakers out there. It's definitely a similar idea to how a lot of TV shows and movies are using the volume where they have a projected background on screens. That definitely makes things easier, but it's not at the level of technical ability and time and money required with what James Cameron is doing with these Avatar films. But I definitely still think it's on the horizon, so it's something we should be constantly thinking about as we make our own films and TV shows. There might be a script that comes around that maybe right now can't be produced because it will cost too much money and the tech isn't that available yet, but as these movies continue to do well, and as long as people keep going to see them, this technology will get more accessible. It's just like AI. Everybody's getting access to AI now and being able to render any image that they want. Imagine when that tool is now built into something like Adobe Premiere, where you can just put in a prompt and say, I want that background to look like a New York skyline, because right now I shot it in Missouri. That is coming. That is inevitable. Don't get me wrong, I totally agree that there is merit to actually shooting stuff on location with your actors in real world environments. Look at the stuff Denis Villeneuve does. He's had conversations with James trying to understand how Cameron does it. How does he put himself in that world without actually being in that world? And I definitely relate with Denis Villeneuve in that aspect, because I'm someone who comes up with ideas as I'm in the room.
I have all my admiration, because you are, I think, working mostly in virtual environment, and I have no idea how you can survive, how you can do that, keep your creativity alive.
Spielberg as well often doesn't storyboard anything that he shoots. He's coming up with it on the fly. It's an organic feeling that you're in this space, you're in where this thing is supposed to happen, and that's where creative inspiration comes from. So if you're not good at visualizing things ahead of time, or being able to imagine what something is going to look like, I think this can be a terrifying way of filmmaking for you. But ultimately, there is no denying it works. If you go see Avatar 2, this is an immersion and a feeling you probably haven't had in a cinema before, especially from something that isn't technically real.
I find as a director, I'm much more attuned to the actors, because that's all I have to worry about. I'm not distracted by the camera move or the extras in the background. I'm just there for them. That's all I care about. That's all I'm watching. It's an amazing process. It's also the only way to do it.
So I'm curious to know what you think. Is this the future of filmmaking? Did Avatar 2 feel real for you? Does this excite you, or does it scare you? I think it's exciting, but it's also a little bit terrifying as well. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video. My name is Patrick Tomasso, and you will see or hear me next time I feel like making a video. Cheers.